Well, I'm Peter Fisk, and I guess my journey started in a physics lab, in a superconductivity lab under the Swiss mountains, and I was studying at the University of Sussex, and I chose to do a dual course in physics and also European studies, and part of that was to go abroad for the year, which was fantastic and ultimately was more useful than the entire degree. And when I was abroad for the year, I was asked to do some study in terms of physics research, and I found a place where I could study, which is part of CERN. I was studying superconductivity, which is where you cool things down to absolute zero, minus 270 degrees, and all sorts of complex stuff. And I hated it. And I went underground each day. I did these experiments. I came up, I watched the graph. The graph kind of plotted out for about a week, and then I did the same thing again, varying some of the conditions. And it was the most tedious thing in the world. It was kind of interesting at the same time because it was exploring new stuff. So whilst intellectually, I guess it was interesting, I was bored out of my mind, and I decided, coming back from my last year at uni, physics wasn't the path I wanted to take. I wanted to do something much more creative, much more active, much more about people. And the European studies side of my degree kind of, in a sense, therefore got me into where I wanted to go. And I started looking around for what I wanted to do next. I looked at the graduate entry programs, and I applied to lots of big companies, and P&G and Unilever and Coke, and eventually chose British Airways, which used to be a great company to join. And joined their graduate program. Spent the next 5 years working around a series of different jobs, which was fantastic. So that's one of the great things a grad program in companies allows you to do. And then found my way in the world of marketing, and did some consulting for a while, which got me further into marketing because it really helped me to understand the detailed kind of methodologies, frameworks, strategies, techniques, and to work with lots of companies at the same time. So, you know, in a sense, in 3 years, you can work with 30 companies rather than one company. So that was good. And then I kept going. I became the Chartered Institute of Marketing CEO in 2003, which was fabulous. So great organization, both in terms of qualifications, but also in terms of promoting marketing, what marketing is about to the wider world of business. Not just in the UK, but all around the world. So, you know, 80,000 members, and actually most of them are overseas. So, you know, a real global network, which is great to be part of. And from there, I wrote my first book, which you have, Marketing Genius. And I thought, what should I write a book about? And I was thinking all these kind of bullshitty terms like high performance marketing and all that kind of stuff. That sounds really boring and this kind of stuff. So I thought, well, what was about me? So the publisher said, do something a bit more personal. And one of the things I found when I started in marketing as a career was that because I'd studied a science subject, people said, you do spreadsheets.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't particularly want to do the spreadsheets all the time. I wanted to do some of the kind of the creative and insight and that kind of stuff. And so, so to me, it was about being Einstein on one side, but it was also about being Picasso on the other side. So the book was all about how Einstein and Picasso would do marketing in the 21st century. And actually, as I studied more about Einstein and Picasso, I actually realized Einstein, whilst you think of him as a crazy, wacky guy who's more of a right brain thinker, that means more intuitive, more kind of random in their thinking. He was actually a very logical thinker. And so, you know, being able to combine the two sides together, and also Picasso, he started out as a mathematician, then being able to kind of combine the two sides together, the intelligence and the imagination, if you like, was really important. So that gave me hope. So the book did really well, translated in 35 languages, went on, wrote 7 more books over the last 15 years. And for the last 15 years, I've had this very kind of lucky, enjoyable career of going around the world, working with all sorts of fabulous companies. So it might be Coke in Atlanta, or RedBull in Austria, or South Korea or Australia, what it might be, and working with all sorts of interesting companies, different sectors, different challenges. And you just learn so much by working with those kinds of companies, and then also being able to do keynote speaking and work at a business school at the same time. So that's kind of what I do today, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a career with lots of highlights, and incredibly fast paced as well.
Yeah.
It sounds, being able to work with so many businesses sounds like an incredible opportunity. Are there any specific highlights that kind of outlined that you really wanted to kind of continue, because you made quite a dramatic shift into marketing, I would say, you know, being a nuclear physicist and then, you know, making that switch. Was there any kind of specific area in your career or thing that happened that clicked, or was it more of like a kind of, once you'd dabbled in this kind of marketing thing, you kind of realized actually, this is something I want to continue pursuing?
Yeah, I guess you know, some of the kind of interesting moments were things like when I was working with British Airways, and we were working on their business class product for long haul, what's called Club World. And at the time, they had big, long, comfy seats like armchairs, but they didn't have beds, which they have these days. And we were trying to work out how the hell can you get a bed into an aircraft. And the mindset was that if you have a bed, you have to have like a hotel room, or you have to have walls and a wardrobe, and you have to have it all shuttered off and all that kind of stuff. And it just wouldn't be profitable to be able to create these big rooms inside an aircraft and get enough of them to make enough money to make the flight profitable. And so eventually we were working in, this is the brands team of British Airways, and the brand is not just about the logo, the identity, the advertising, it's really about solving a problem. And we try to solve the problem of the business traveler traveling long haul. And how they could get a good night's sleep, so when they get to New York or wherever, they can get up and do a day's work. And eventually we kind of started talking to different types of people, and the problem was how to get a good night's sleep in a very small space. And it struck us that something like a yacht would be a great example of that. So being able to then talk to a load of yacht designers who we found on the South Coast, and brought them into the offices, and they started to explain how they made fold-away beds. And the first flat bed on an aircraft anywhere in the world was actually made by a yacht designer. So I think that idea of being able to solve a problem and be able to look outside your normal kind of way of thinking becomes really important. So that's why employers, companies love people who've kind of got a breadth of experience, and so they can think in a broader way.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that point, where a lot of people maybe consider marketing as this kind of separate function to the rest of the operations, but it really seems like it's so integrated within every area of operations, and you really got to kind of look at the way the business actually functions to really work on your marketing.
I think that's a really good point, and it's become more so, which is both a strength and also a bit of a danger at the same time. So it's a strength because, you know, ultimately marketing is about driving growth. And I remember working with Coca Cola in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were working on their global marketing plan or marketing strategy. And we were trying to get their budget signed off. You can imagine Coca Cola's budget for marketing is pretty huge. But the problem was that it's always seen as a cost line. And companies, particularly finance directors, typically want to reduce costs. They don't want to increase costs. So positioning marketing and the marketing plan and the marketing budget as a kind of a functional plan of the business was always kind of ended up in reducing costs. And so we changed the name of the plan to a growth plan. And so the Coca-Cola marketing department produced the growth plan. And we went to the finance director and all the executive team, and they said, hey, we don't want to reduce the cost of this budget. We want to increase this budget, because if we increase the investment, it's not a cost, it's an investment. If we increase the investment, we'll get a better return, we'll get more growth. And therefore that started marketing and Coke being a growth activity, and being a growth activity, it kind of spread outside its traditional function. And so I think today you do see marketing in its broader sense, the kind of marketing which we study at uni. Marketing in its broader sense becomes a holistic thing for the whole company. And so, CEOs and finance and strategy people, operational people, sales people, they're all working on aspects of the product and the segments and the kind of the distribution channels and building the brand and all that kind of stuff. And so it's all done in relation to how can we drive growth. So it is a holistic function. The only challenge, therefore, is becomes what is marketing. And so marketing can almost kind of disappear, a bit like innovation in some ways. Innovation is everything but nothing. And the challenge is that marketing still needs to stay important and a place at the table, if you like, despite being dissipated across the organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, that I hadn't really thought about. Where, I guess if it's everywhere, it's almost nowhere. In a sense.
I find a lot of marketing departments today, they're pretty tactical, and they're actually more tactical than they used to be. So in the past, you'd have strategic marketing, a bit like your 4Ps if you look at the traditional model. So you'd look at which markets, which segments, and then you develop your holistic marketing plan in response to that. But today, most marketing within the marketing department is actually quite operational, and it's focused on kind of programmatic ads and data analytics and kind of behavioral science and all that kind of technical stuff, which is kind of the technical aspects, if you like.
I can certainly weigh in on that. In that, I did an internship at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and we certainly were looking very tactically, looking at those kind of different digital methods of reaching the customer. So I've got another question. We've kind of touched on it, but in your career, you've had kind of a vast amount of experience, and I'm sure marketing has changed since you started. But we talked about kind of the change in strategy and moving to tactical and things like that. What would you say there are any other changes throughout your career in terms of how you've seen marketing in the marketplace and things like that?
Yeah, good question. So I guess the real big thing which has changed is that markets themselves used to be pretty static. The market for rental cars, the market for soft drinks, the market for airlines, whatever it might be, was pretty steady, predictable, same competitors, same kind of customer needs, and it kind of went on year after year. So it was kind of a steady state world. But today, partly because of technologies, markets are quite dynamic. They're constantly changing, they're blurring together. So if you look at something like entertainment, how it blurs together with telecoms, with technology, and even with finance and that kind of stuff, then there's a real blur in terms of what market are you in, and you can't really even find sectors in the traditional boxes. And it's ultimately up to you to define or to frame your own sector. So I think that whole idea of market, and almost not just marketing, but market strategy, and how can you develop your market, not just your marketing, and shape the market you want to have, becomes really important. So for example, I worked with Time Warner, and Time Warner were focused on publishing things like Time magazine, if you imagine that, but then they moved rapidly into entertainment. And so, they shifted market, and that meant a whole shift in terms of the kinds of activities, the kinds of products and services they have, the kind of partners they needed, because they needed new capabilities, so they had to acquire new partners. And it drove a lot of the business strategy. So the market thinking drove the strategy of the company. And it even changed the share price of the company, because the PE ratio in the entertainment sector was about 3 times greater than the PE ratio in the publishing sector. So it was a financially too. And therefore, companies became much more market-driven, customer-driven, but also market-driven. So I think there's that big strategic shift.
Yeah.
I think the other big shift is that our understanding of consumers or customers has fundamentally changed. And marketers used to be, well, quite a lot of marketers still are lazy, but every marketer used to be lazy in terms of treating a market in a standardized way. Every customer was the same. So we'll have one brochure for everybody. We'll have one product or one service level for everybody. We have one price point for everybody. We have one website even for everybody. And today we live in a much more micro-segmented world, which people demand a more personalized approach, and we have the analytics and so on to help us to do that in a much more predictive way. So marketing can be kind of anticipating what people want rather than just responding. So that's another shift. I think probably the biggest shift of all is that if you went into marketing when I did, everybody was obsessed with advertising. And advertising was the holy grail, and advertising is what most people spent the most of their money on, and advertising was the dead sexy thing. And today that's fundamentally changed, because the way in which you engage people is actually through those programmatic ads and all the rest of it. And the programmatic ads are not driven by great creativity, they're driven by science. And so that whole shift, I think, has become really important. What it's also meant is that the role of partners has changed, because actually advertising was driven by the ad agencies. And so they were the people who did the creativity. I was thinking, when you go into marketing, you do loads of creative stuff, but most of the creativity was done by the ad agency, was outsourced to a third party. And today, those ad agencies are desperately trying to find a role, because the majority of budgets are not spent on advertising anymore. So, it becomes much more insight agencies, behavioral science agencies, technology companies, data analytic companies, who become much more powerful, and they're providing new types of outsourced and partner roles with marketers. So marketers, in a sense, become project managers to be able to manage all of these different partner companies, and to be able to manage overall programs of activity, not campaigns, but programs of activities, which are done by numerous companies and numerous techniques together. So I think lots of changes in a sense, but but it's a very different world.
Certainly the point about how it's become far more scientific, and it's still the creative endeavor, I think, but there's certainly so much more kind of data driven and scientific decision making. That's
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think the whole world, in terms of the way in which data, and particularly artificial intelligence, is challenging the things which human beings can do, is there, and it will happen at great speed over the next couple of years. But it won't move us forwards. You need the leaps of human imagination to move us forwards in new ways, to imagine new kinds of concepts, to frame markets in new ways, to imagine new concepts which don't exist today, which people could want, which a machine can't anticipate. And so that kind of more intuitive thing is still there, but don't expect to do it 24/7.
That's a great point. Moving on from some of the changes that we've seen, what do you see today in today's marketing world as some of the biggest things that we're facing, the biggest things that we can tackle right now, I guess, and for the future?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest shifts of all is obviously the role of business within society. And so the role of business in terms of how it depends upon society and depends upon its environment for its natural resources. So to make products, it requires water, energy, metals, whatever from the world. And so how can you replenish the world and the environment? So ultimately, how can you sustain the resources you take and give back and create a circular kind of economy? But the same thing for society. As you employ people, and as you kind of play a role in local communities, if you take from that, or if you take particularly in terms of low wages and that kind of stuff, how do you make sure you respond to that? And so how can you be a more fair employer and a good citizen in society? And we know all those big challenges. We know all the big problems, be it climate change, or be it in terms of inequality, in terms of rich versus poor, not just in emerging markets, but in the UK, for example, as well. And I think one of the realizations is that businesses have immense power. They have immense assets, and the biggest asset they have of all is well, two assets. One is their brand, because that's a engaging, motivating force by which people kind of have desires and dreams and aspirations. So they will buy things from that brand. They'll trust that brand. And also the customer base. And so we have this network of customers who want things. And so the role is for businesses, and particularly for brands, if you like, to be platforms for good. And so how can it be a platform for change and platform for good? So how can it be a platform by which people can change behavior? So, for example, how can they stop using so much packaging, thereby they choose brands which are kind of less packaging intensive, or they only use renewable packaging? But also, how can they can encourage change which is good? So the person gets what they want, but they do good at the same time. And there's obvious classic examples like Tom's or Warby Parker, for example, 1 for 1, in terms of every time you buy what you want, which is a cool pair of glasses, then somebody who can't afford them gets a pair in the world as well. But it goes beyond that in terms of saying, for example, a great example at the moment is Danone, the French yogurt and dairy company, which has transformed itself under Emmanuel Faber, their CEO, into a B Corporation, so a sustainable-minded organization. And they see themselves as on a mission where food creates a healthier world. So they actually see themselves as a health company, not a food company. And so, every one of their brands, they have 47 brands, like, Volvic mineral water, Danone yogurt. And every one of their brands is now becoming a manifesto brand. And what they're doing is saying, what is the insight which is kind of good for the consumer, something the consumer really wants, but also good for the world at the same time, something which can solve a real problem in the world. And if I can kind of find that insight, that magic moment, which kind of achieves both things, I will create a fantastic product, fantastic service, and my brand will be much more attractive to the consumer, but also do good for the world at the same time. So Emmanuel Faber is trying to create these 47 manifesto brands and use his entire company as a platform for change and for healthiness, in his case, in the world.
Sure. That reminds me of a company that I found. For the life of me, I can't remember the brand name, unfortunately. But I know in Germany they've been developing a new search engine where every search that you make, the company aims to plant a tree. Lots of ideas where you kind of where the 1 for 1 idea sounds like.
Take them further. I mean, if you take the example of planting a tree, which kind of sounds obvious in some ways, but if you go to China, which is where many of the most amazing kind of innovations and most kind of fastest growing brands are in the world right now. And financial is one of their top 3 biggest financial service companies. It's actually just been acquired by Alibaba. And financial, every time you spend money on anything, so it has effectively an electronic payment system. So every time you buy anything with their payment system, you get points, and these points are not kind of giving you prizes; they're creating trees. And so every time you spend money, you create some trees, which then and financial will plant. But what they're doing is they're planting the world's largest forest in a whole deserted area of China. And so you can then go on to the website and you can see, or you can choose actually, where you want your trees to be planted. And then you can watch your trees. These are real trees. You can watch your trees grow. But it's kind of gamified at the same time. So I think, you know, the way in which, one of the things the Chinese are really good at, surprisingly in some ways, is that gamifying brands and gamifying consumer behaviors, so that you encourage them to do things because you make it fun and you make it kind of participative at the same time as what it's actually achieved.
Yeah, certainly. I think kind of the gamification strategy is a really good idea. Certainly brings out the kind of enjoyment of kind of interacting with businesses and things like that.
Yeah, well, if you look at Alibaba itself, it's shopping. You'll have heard of its shopping festival. The Single Days, it used to be called, the 11th of November each year. It has this big shopping festival, and last year it generated, I think it was $30.8 billion in
ridiculous
24 hours. Yeah, which is actually 10 times, just over 10 times more than Amazon generated in its Black Friday sale. So the equivalent in America. And how did it do that? It gamified the process. So whilst Amazon is kind of saying, okay, here's 30% off all these products and just take what you like, take the big discount. Alibaba is saying, let's play a game. You have to search for the red envelopes. You have to play a game where you find the black cats, which are a lucky thing in China. And if you find the red envelope, or if you find a black cat, you win a prize. And so people are so excited they've won a prize, they want to spend it immediately, and the prize is a discount. So you have to earn your discounts, and therefore the conversion rate, so we're talking marketing, the conversion rate of of people who find the prize to actually make a purchase is far, far greater. And that's essentially the biggest reason why they're so much more successful.
Sure. That's a really, a great strategy. I'm amazed by some of these emerging markets that that seem to be applying that gamification strategy as well. And I hope to see more of that.
And they're not actually emerging markets, are they? They're kind of
in China, no, but I think I was listening to in one of your keynotes regarding some market changes in terms of city development and how in the future some of our current cities now, I know the majority of the largest cities are in China and Eastern Asia, but that there may be a shift towards some of the African cities and things like that. And
the current estimate is by the end of this century, in 2100, the 3 largest cities in the world will all be in Africa, and they will be Lagos, Dar es Salaam, and Kinshasa. And so phenomenal. In terms of the speed of urbanization and also what that means for brands and so on. So simple things in China, they've realized they can't sell big boxes of washing powder, and it was actually Chinese urbanization which drove washing powder innovation from powder to liquid, because you have more concentrated liquid than you can have in the powder form, and people buy the small liquid capsules as opposed to the big boxes of powder, because they didn't have space in their small apartments where they lived in the big cities. And so a lot of these kind of social trends are actually driving product innovations.
Excellent. So I just wanted to ask you for my final question, if you have any tips or advice for students and graduates just starting their careers in marketing and looking for different opportunities, and any advice for that for those people?
Okay. I guess the biggest thing is as I talked about, the world of marketing is kind of changing rapidly, but it's also it's not just the precise theory of marketing which matters. It's being able to have a broad outlook on the world. And I came from the world of physics, which kind of didn't help me really, but it did help me in a lot of ways because actually physics is problem solving. So I mentioned, in a sense, brand development is problem solving. So developing a hypothesis and then finding ways to prove it and experimenting is kind of key part of things today in science in terms of data. But anywhere you come from, so don't feel as though you have to have a marketing or a business degree in order to do it. I know you have, but you don't have to have that. So don't be put off by that, because actually the best way you will learn is by doing stuff and getting into doing stuff. And don't be too kind of obsessed about where you start, because it's, you can start in all sorts of weird and wonderful places, and they will all be good experiences. And I remember, in my first couple of years, I was, despite being lucky enough to be in one of the top corporations in the UK at the time, then I still felt as though I was kind of undervalued and not doing the things I could do. I was kind of smarter than the job I was doing, in a sense. And I think we've got to realize that every job which we do is actually something which is useful. So, I spent a couple of years working in sales, selling business to business, which I didn't really want to do. I wanted to do the brand building stuff. But the sales stuff was actually really useful because it was, for the rest of my life, it's been, I understand both how to sell better or to negotiate influence better, but also understand the customer better. So, being able to use that and being able to have the legitimacy that you understand the customer better is important. So, do a variety of different jobs. One of the earlier marketing jobs I did was channel development. Channel development, it's kind of more sexy now, but it was seen as the really unsexy part of marketing, because it was distribution channels, boring kind of logistics. But today, distribution channels is a core part of your business model, and so it's really kind of quite innovative and exciting in terms of what you can do with it. So look for lots of different places and do lots of different things. I think that's important. I think it's also kind of, do you go for big company or small company is a really interesting question. Ultimately, I think your future is served by what you learn. So obviously big companies are useful in the sense they're doing leading edge stuff. They've got sexy brands. They've got interesting kind of initiatives happening. They've got all the latest techniques, and they've got big budgets to do things. But you can also get lost in big companies. So it's not always the best way to go. And going for smaller companies, particularly kind of entrepreneurial smaller companies where you're doing something, in a sense, think about what would an employer want, why would an employer want me as a result of that? So if you just go into a small company which does things the way it's always been done, then you're not going to learn much. But if you go to a small company which is kind of exploring, I don't know, the digital health space, or they're kind of, exploring new markets, or they're kind of adopting new techniques and more entrepreneurial techniques which a corporate wants to learn from, then you become a valuable asset which somebody might want to recruit in the future. I think consulting is also useful. So I spent some time in consulting. You learn a lot of the models very quickly and become much more kind of strategic in a sense. I wouldn't probably advise doing it first, because it's good to have some real world experience before you do that kind of stuff. But it's a way of accelerating your career, because you can work with lots of different clients and you can kind of use lots of different techniques very quickly. But I think ultimately it's what you make of it. The other one is spend time overseas. So really get some interesting experiences. If you can get Asia, then that would be fantastic in today's world. But being able to really demonstrate those things, do it early in your career, before you start having things like family ties and all that kind of stuff. So whilst you've got a bit more freedom, then kind of make the most of kind of doing the more kind of interesting, intrepid aspects of stuff, and make sure you have fun at the same time, because ultimately I found in the people who are my best friends in the world of marketing, they've made their own careers. It's not nobody's going to guide you. You almost have to be an entrepreneur, an expeditionary yourself. But don't be rushed. You've got plenty of time, and so keep doing things. Maybe do some more study. it's a tough time at the moment to enter the job market. I totally understand.
Yeah.
So, do some more study, or go to a different country, do some more study. So there's no hurry, apart from paying off loans, but you've got plenty of time to do that. I think just kind of take the most of every opportunity, seize the opportunities, and kind of the future will reward those people who have the most eclectic, the most diverse perspectives and experiences, and can make sense of kind of a world which keeps changing incredibly fast. And they have the guts, the courage to want to be part of that evolving, changing, exciting world.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate you kind of going through all of your career and providing advice and
Right.
showing your depth of experience. And I certainly found that really valuable, and I'm sure students and anyone interested in a career in marketing will certainly find this incredibly valuable. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I wish all of you a lot of luck. I know it's a tough time,
Sure.
but it's also an exciting time because there's so much changing. And a quote I've been saying a lot over the last few weeks is that 57% of the Fortune 500, 57% of those companies were born in a downturn. So downturns are the times when companies innovate, when new companies are founded, when new leaders step up, when new things happen. And so downturns can be intimidating, but they can also be exciting. And I think, just look around, make the most of what you got, and feel free to look at my website. There's loads and loads of articles, videos, downloads, toolkits, all the rest of it. It's the GeniusWorks.com. There's my
yes.
ad.
We'll put a link in the social channels.
Sign up for my newsletter if you want that as well. That's kind of fun, kind of what's going on in the world of business every month and so on. So
definitely.
Good luck and keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate the call.
Bye-bye.
Bye.